Today we're going to be working on the tiller. Now we got two tillers. We got a roto tiller where the tines are in the front and not the back. This is a rear drive PTO tiller, and these things are miracle workers. If you're going to be a gardener, if you're going to be having a large garden and you're going to be working up a lot of fresh or hard soil, these things with little effort can just plow up anything you need, till it over. So this is like a 1986 Troy-Bilt horse. It's got the Kohler 8 Magnum on it. They still make that motor, it's different. It's got a lot of new bells and whistles. But this summer, I came in at the beginning and I I kind of rebuilt the motor. I didn't take it apart and put new rings on it or anything, but I put in new fuel lines, I put a new muffler on it, I put in some new seals, on the carburetor, and rebuilt all the fuel pump and everything. So that engine should be good to go for a couple of years. But the problem we're having now is when you put it into the PTO, when you engage the PTO to turn the rear tines, it likes to jump out of PTO. It likes to jump out of gear. And that spring in there, sometimes these things get stuck and you put a little WD-40 on that spring that pushes that PTO into the other PTO and it locks it in with some knuckles. And that worked, but that spring just wore out and the seal wore out. And I noticed I started getting grease dripping from down in here. So I'll bring you in closer and show you what we got to do. The first thing we need to do though is I will lock down the transmission into low gear so it doesn't roll around on me and I can tip it back and forth. And then I'll disconnect the spark plug. Just because I don't want that motor turning over for some reason. I mean, I've never heard of it happening to somebody, but they always recommend to unplug it so that motor doesn't turn over or get your fingers caught or chop your hand off, or there's a whole slew of things that could happen. The other thing I'm going to do is I got me an oil pan down here. I'm going to take this oil pan, the shallow oil pan, and I'm going to put it up under here as best as I could, because I know when I crack this seal open, oil's going to come out. Grease, actually. Actual grease. So we'll just see what happens. Let's get into it. I'll bring you in closer. Okay, so what's happening is right here, actually, let me take you around this side. On this side of the tiller, this here is my PTO engagement. And it slides back and forth. And when you pull this back, it pushes a knuckle in this here, and it connects to a knuckle that's on the tiller side. And they actually make attachments that you can unscrew. This bolt here, there's two. There's one on this side and one over there. And you can actually buy attachments from Troy-Bilt where you unscrew this and you can buy like a generator that will fit back here, or snow blower will fit back here. We don't need snow blowers here. So what we do is this is where I'm having my problem. But I know that if I'm going to rebuild this and open all this up, I'm going to go ahead and climb under here. Well, I'm going to climb under there and take all that apart and make sure that all those seals and everything's good, because this is the fill cap for the oil, the pumpkin oil is what we call it, and I'll fill it up and then it's gone within a couple of days. So it's leaking out somewhere, and I know some of it's leaking out here because, I mean, look at that. Doesn't that just look great? So let's get into it. Okay, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna disconnect this spark plug. Let's disconnect it. And then I'm going to take my tools. And when you do this, you want to get yourself like a 5-gallon bucket to sit on. Brings you closer to what you're actually working on. Okay. Now these bolts that are down here are 3/4. And there's, like I said, there's 2 of them. Once you get them loose, you can pretty much turn them by hand. It's an awkward fit, but you can get in there. A part of being a homesteader or an urban farmer, and I think it goes for any farm, is that everything seems to break. And so you got to be a fairly good mechanic. And when you're learning how to be a mechanic, okay, there's one, I'll put it over here. When you're learning to be a mechanic, you got to learn to be flexible and take your time and not get upset, not get worked up, because things are going to happen, and you can't get worked up, because you'll get frustrated and you'll hurt yourself, and then you don't get the job done either way. That's the whole point of this. So what we'll do here, what I'm going to do is tip this forward. Now that I got that one bolt off, now I'm going to tip this forward. I'm actually going to take this real quick and put it in high gear. Okay, give me a little bit more room down there. And I'm going to pull up on this. See how that's already loose? I'm going to pull up on it. Take some of that bind off of it. And he's got 30 plus years of grease and dirt on him. Now I'm going to pull this off now. Okay. Let me get a rag and take you in there and I'll show you. All right. So you see here, there's the PTO in there. And when I move this, you see I'm moving that. And you see how that moves forward, and that engages that PTO. And we're going to change that piece, focus. We're going to change that piece in there. Oh man, look at that. That's the good stuff. I mean, it's like glue. That's just terrible. Okay, and then without getting oil all over the camera here. Here, focus. You see it's starting to drip out already. And then this is the PTO here that was giving us so many issues. And when you push down on this, see, you should be able to push down and that should spring back, and it's not. And I can tell from this pin here, focus. I can focus. There's a pin, counter pin there, and this should be pushed all the way up to this spring clamp, or this, whatever this is called. I can't remember what those are actually called, but this clip. So we're going to take all this off. We're going to take all these out, replace all of this. There's a seal in there. And then if you look down here, in the tiller tines, it's kind of dark, but there's actually a lot of grease dripping right in here. And this is wet looking. See, here it's dry, but here it looks wet. So I know there's grease dripping from there too. So let's get to it. Okay, so I've been working on these screws that are rusted out, and I was able to get some of them out. I was able to get the 2 rear ones out. The third one I'm not worried about. It's going to come out easy. There we go. Okay, look at that screw. It is chewed up, rusted up, beat up. And then here's the other one. This one wasn't so bad, but look at that angle on there. So I got those 2 out, and I was able, one of these came out without a hitch. These 2 I was able to get out. So I still got 2 more to get out. So what we're gonna do, and I might regret this, but this plate sits, the screws, there's probably 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch of meat here to the main housing. So what I'm going to do is very carefully cut the top of these screws off, and then just take this off, and then get in there with some vice grips or something and try to unscrew that, because they're not very tight. If I can get a good grip on them, I'm pretty confident that I can unscrew them. And but I gotta get these heads off. So to do that, I'm gonna use some drill bits. Now, if you're gonna do this, you need to have good drill bits. And Norseman drill bits are some of the best drill bits that I've ever came in contact with. You get a package of them. They come in this little guy right here, and I got them from them. It's a tool company, Empire Tools, here in Houston. But this set right here will run you probably close to $200 plus. And let's see if I can open it with one hand. There we go. And it's a full set. But these things will cut through steel like it's butter. And they're just regular drill bits, but if you're going to do this, you're going to need good drill bits. So let's try it. Oh, and the other thing is I'm still working down here on the floor, and I haven't put it on the table. One, because the table, it's not a workbench, so the table flex when I hit it. If I hit it with a hammer or something, it flexes, and I don't need that. The other thing is it's still bleeding. Alright guys, so we took all this stuff apart, we cleaned it up, and what we ended up doing, try to get this up here for you. This is the inside, and I cleaned this up pretty good, and it's still dripping some oil and some grease, so I'm going to get in there with some more Varsol and get all that out. Varsol is really hard to find, but you can find it if you know where to look. It's called Napa. You get it at Napa, and you can only get it in 5-gallon containers. And you're going to want to walk in. You want to find the oldest guy that works there and ask him for Varsol. If you ask any of the young people, they'll go, oh no, we don't carry that. We don't know even what it is. Varsol, okay? The PTO was sticking, and the reason why it was sticking was because of the spring. The spring was worn out, and as you can see, it should have a coil right here, but instead it has like a little needle, and boy, it's sharp. And what was happening was that was corkscrewing through the oil seal, and it busted the oil seal in here and chewed it all to high heaven. You can see it right there. It's all chewed up. So we're going to put in a new seal there. I want to clean this up a little bit more. I'm not going to do it today because when I pulled out the drive shaft, so the PTO, this spring fits on to here, and the PTO sits here, okay? And if you look in here, you'll see there's some of the spring right there. So what's going to happen is I have to rebuild all this. Well, what ended up happening was this shaft is rusted all up. And it is worn out. If you look right here, It's all rusted up. Where's my, here we go. We'll use this. This is a little bit better. We use it in construction, a lot of times we try to use nails. All this is chewed up. It's rolled over. I don't know how well y'all can see that. And this is what these are supposed to look like, these screws, or the, I'm not sure what you call that. I'm gonna say screws. But they are worn out to nothing. And what's even worse is the sprocket sits on there like that. And as this spins, this turns. The sprocket which turns the tines. And what has happened over the years is it has worn down. See if I can get, I'm trying to explain this good to y'all. It has chewed up. You can see where it's all chewed up here and broken off of it. This is brass. It's a healthy piece of brass though. These should be much deeper cuts in here. And some of that is just from wear and tear. Some of that is from not changing the oil out correctly and not having the right viscosity and the right oil in there to keep it from having a lot of friction. I know the last time I ran this thing, well, let me give you a little backstory on this. This tiller was purchased years and years ago. It was 1985, I believe it was. This tiller was purchased as a gift to my grandfather, and it was purchased brand new. And he used it, and he wore it out, man. He did. Now he tried to keep it up, keep it in good shape, but he wore it out. And you can see, and he lived down on the coast, and so that salt water just chewed up all of this. And when he passed away in 06, I got the tiller. And I sat on that tiller. I used it once or twice, and I sat on that tiller, and I haven't used it since. And so this beginning of this summer, I tore it out of the barn, and I wanted to fix it up and use it. I checked the oil. I checked everything that was in there, all the oils and the gas and everything. I cleaned out the carbs and everything. And the oils look good. I changed the oil in the motor, but in these drive shafts I did not. And I drained the oil out, and the oil looked good. And so I replaced it with some oil, threw a little bit of Lucas in there, and off we went. Well, I tilled the garden, plowed it for, I don't know, 2-3 hours. And I reached down and touched this housing on here. Boy, it burnt my hand. So I knew then that something was up. And that's when I knew I needed to bust this thing open. And when I took it off, that's when I found all that oil coming out of here. And that's when I knew we got a problem, Houston. So, needless to say, if you look in here, I don't know if the lighting's good enough, but if you look in here, you'll see all those little sparks, those little gold specks. That's brass from this thing. And I tried to clean it out, but I didn't clean it all out. So, the plan is, I was hoping I'd put this thing together, get this video posted, and in the next video, you ought to see me preparing the big garden. But that's not what's going to happen. We'll go maybe there. We'll see how that looks. So here's the game plan for today, guys. What we're going to do is we're going to clean up this mess. I'm going to clean up this PTO on here a little bit better. And clean up all my tools. There's not much more we can do. I got to get these parts. So I just ran in the house. We just ordered them. And man, parts like this is not cheap. It is not cheap to run a tiller like this. They say that if you go from a mule and like a plow or an ox and a plow to a tiller, a motorized tiller like this, it'll cut your time by 20%. And I don't believe that. I think it's a lot more than that. And I know that if you try to do it by hand, it's not even worth trying. It just, I wouldn't even try it. You can get the rototillers fairly cheap. You can pick up a rototiller for, especially used if you keep your eyes open, for $200. You can buy new ones for $400-500. To buy one like this tiller new, you're looking at about $2,500. But you can plow a 50 by 50 garden in about an hour with this versus a regular rototiller that would take you 2 or 3 days of literally non-stop tilling. So that's why we have it. When you get those bigger gardens, you want it. And a lot of people would just switch over to a PTO driven tiller attachment that would go to a tractor. But we don't have that option. So I'm going to clean up some of this because I got to clean up and wash some more of this stuff in some Varsol. Like, this is the PTO. Oh, I can't believe I'm grabbing this. I worked at a mechanic shop for years, 2-3 years, and I used to have grease all over me, and it never bothered me one time. But now that I'm getting older, man, I don't like grease on me. It's too much work to get that crap off. All right, so there is a PTO. This is what we're going to call PTO. They look different. Different PTOs look different. But these are the knuckles. And if you look, when it engages on the tiller, on the motor part, it locks in. And I don't know if you can tell. I'm trying to clean this up a little bit. But these are angled. See how they're slanted? And that's so that when it engages, it slips off and then it locks. And then it starts the spinning process. And it's got a counter pin in there. I'm going to call it a counter pin, which it's not a counter pin. I don't know what it's called right now. I did not eat my Wheaties for breakfast, but it's got a counter pin in there. That's what happens when you don't eat your Wheaties. You don't remember things like you should. So kids, eat your Wheaties. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bag all this stuff up, put it in zippy bags, and just get everything ready. And then the next video you'll see is when we get these parts in and start putting this thing together. So guys, sometimes you can only go so far in a job before you have to stop. But we can pick it up later. I just cannot believe, though, how chewed up this sprocket is. It is just amazing to me. And it is razor sharp. Well, guys, this is it. This is what we're going to do today. So until next time, keep it real.